The alarm bells rang through the Galactic Academy for the third time that week. Professor Kethmoran dropped his morning drink and ran toward the sound. He already knew what he would find. Blue smoke was coming from the main computer lab, and students were running out of the building. In the center of the chaos stood Zarath. Her blue scales caught the emergency lights as she calmly watched the sparks fly from the destroyed machines. Her forearms moved quickly as she gathered small metal pieces from the floor. She looked up at the professor with bright yellow eyes that showed no fear. "Zarath!" Professor Kethmoran shouted. "What have you done now?" The young alien girl tilted her head. "I fixed the problem with the old computers. They were too slow. Now they will work much better." The professor looked at the smoking ruins. "Better? You destroyed half the lab." "No," Zarath said with a small smile. "I made them faster. The fire will stop soon. Then you will see." This was not the first time Zarath had caused trouble at the academy. For 3 years, she had been the biggest problem the school had ever seen. Every teacher who tried to control her failed. Every punishment made her more creative in her next act of rebellion. Zarath was a Vorthok, a species known for being wild and free. Her people did not like rules or being told what to do. They lived on a planet where chaos and creativity went hand in hand. But the Galactic Academy had rules, many rules, and Zarath broke them all. Professor Kethmoran was from the Zenthari Empire. His people believed in order and control. They had built great cities and powerful armies by following strict rules. He had been chosen to tame the wild alien girl because he was the best at making difficult students behave. But Zarath was different from any student he had ever met. The first week she arrived, she had reprogrammed the cafeteria food machines to serve dessert for every meal. The second week, she made all the doors in the school open backwards. The third week, she somehow made the gravity in the library turn upside down for 2 hours. Each time, the professors punished her. They put her in isolation rooms. They took away her privileges. They made her write long reports about proper behavior, but nothing worked. If anything, the punishments made her more creative. "Why do you do these things?" Professor Kethmoran had asked her many times. "Because it is fun," she always answered, "and because your way is boring." The other teachers had given up on her. They called her the impossible one and whispered that she could never be taught. Some even suggested sending her home to her wild planet. But Professor Kethmoran refused to give up. His pride would not let him fail. He tried everything he knew. He used fear tactics, showing her what happened to students who did not follow rules. He used reward systems, promising her special privileges if she behaved. He even tried to make friends with her, thinking she just needed someone to care about her. Nothing worked. The worst part was that Zarath was incredibly smart. Her test scores were higher than students who had been at the academy for many years. She understood complex science and math problems faster than anyone else. When she wanted to, she could build amazing machines and solve puzzles that stumped the professors. But she only used her intelligence to cause more trouble. Last month, she had built a device that made all the clocks in the school run at different speeds. Students missed classes, teachers arrived at wrong times, and nobody knew what time it really was for 3 days. When they finally caught her, she explained exactly how the device worked and why it was actually an improvement to their primitive time system. The month before that, she had somehow made the school's artificial gravity create small floating islands in the main hallway. Students could jump from one to another like stepping stones. It was beautiful and fun, but it violated at least 12 safety regulations. Now, as Professor Kethmoran stood in the smoking computer lab, he felt his patience running out. The other professors were starting to question his methods. Some were even laughing behind his back, saying that the great behavioral expert had finally met his match. "Zarath," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Come with me. We need to talk." She followed him to his office, her 4 arms swinging casually at her sides. She looked around the room with curious eyes, as if seeing it for the first time, even though she had been there many times before. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the chair across from his desk. Instead, she stood on the chair and looked out the window. "Your view is nice from here," she said. "I can see the garden where I planted the singing flowers last week." Professor Kethmoran rubbed his temples. The singing flowers had been another unauthorized project. They were beautiful but sang constantly, making it impossible for students to study in the nearby classrooms. Zarath, we cannot continue like this, he said. The Academy Council is losing patience. If you cannot learn to follow our rules, they will send you away. She turned to look at him, her yellow eyes serious for the first time. Your rules are stupid, she said simply. They make everything boring and slow. Why should I follow stupid rules? Because that is how society works, he explained for the 100th time. We have rules so everyone can live and work together peacefully. My people live together without your rules, she replied. We are happy. We create beautiful things. We solve problems by thinking in new ways. Your rules stop new thinking. Professor Kethmoran had heard this argument before, but today something was different. Today, he was tired. Tired of fighting a battle he could not win. Tired of being made to look foolish by a young alien girl. Tired of defending methods that clearly did not work. As he looked at Zarath standing on his chair, unafraid and unashamed, he wondered if perhaps the problem was not with her. Perhaps the problem was with them. 3 weeks after the computer lab incident, something unusual happened at the Galactic Academy. A small transport ship landed on the main platform, carrying the Academy's first human teacher. Dr. Amy Chen stepped off the ship carrying only a simple bag and a small plant in a pot. She was shorter than most of the alien professors and looked very ordinary compared to the tall, impressive beings who ran the Academy. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple style, and she wore plain clothes that made her blend into the background. The other professors watched her arrival with mixed feelings. Humans were still new to galactic society. Most aliens thought of them as a primitive species who had just learned to travel between stars. The idea that a human could teach at the prestigious Galactic Academy seemed almost like a joke to many. Professor Kethmoran greeted Amy at the landing platform. He had requested her transfer as part of a cultural exchange program, though his real reason was different. He hoped that perhaps a completely different approach might work where his methods had failed. Welcome to the Academy, Dr. Chen, he said in the formal tone he used with all new faculty. Thank you, Amy replied with a warm smile. I am excited to be here. I have heard so much about your school. As they walked through the Academy halls, Professor Kethmoran pointed out the important buildings and explained the school's history. Amy listened politely but seemed more interested in watching the students. She noticed how they moved in groups based on their species, rarely mixing with aliens who looked different from them. Tell me about your students, Amy said. Are there any who need special attention? Professor Kethmoran's expression grew dark. There is one student who has been challenging, a young Vorthak named Zarath. She has been with us for 3 years and has caused nothing but trouble. Every teacher who has tried to help her has failed. Amy nodded thoughtfully. What kind of trouble? She destroys property, breaks rules, and refuses to follow any authority. She is brilliant, but uses her intelligence for chaos instead of learning. We are running out of options. Has anyone tried to understand why she acts this way? Amy asked. Professor Kethmoran looked surprised by the question. We know why. Her species is naturally rebellious and wild. They do not respect proper order and discipline. Amy was quiet for a moment. May I observe her? Of course, Professor Kethmoran said. But I warn you, do not expect much. The best behavioral experts in the galaxy have tried to help her. Human methods are still very basic. Amy spent her first week at the academy just watching. She observed classes, ate in the cafeteria, and walked through the halls during break times. She paid special attention to Zarath, but always from a distance. What she saw was interesting. Zarath sat alone in classes, looking bored and restless. When teachers asked questions, she knew the answers, but gave them in ways that challenged the lessons. When other students worked in groups, she worked alone, finishing assignments much faster than anyone else. Amy noticed that Zarath never hurt anyone with her pranks. She was careful to make sure her chaos did not cause real harm. Her modifications to school systems were often actually improvements, even if they broke the rules. Most importantly, Amy saw that Zarath was lonely. Despite her rebellious behavior, or perhaps because of it, she had no friends. Other students were afraid of her or thought she was too strange. Teachers saw her only as a problem to be solved. During her second week, Amy made a request that shocked the faculty. She asked for permission to work with Zarath one-on-one. Professor Kethmoran called a meeting with the senior faculty to discuss the request. The meeting room was filled with the Academy's most respected teachers, representing dozens of different alien species. "This is highly unusual," said Professor Veltar, a tall insect-like being who taught advanced mathematics. "Dr. Chen has no experience with problem students. Zarath needs strong discipline, not gentle human sentiment." "I agree," said Dr. Morgesh, whose species was known for their logical thinking. "Human psychology is too simple for complex behavioral problems. We have already tried every advanced technique." Professor Kethmoran felt torn. Part of him agreed with his colleagues, but another part of him was curious about what this quiet human might do differently. "What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Chen?" he asked. Amy stood up, looking small among the large alien professors. "I would like to work with Zarath outside the normal classroom structure. No punishments, no rewards, no formal lessons, just conversation and activities that interest her." The room erupted in surprised voices. Several professors spoke at once, all expressing doubt about such an unstructured approach. "That is not teaching," Professor Veltar said. "That is just talking." "Sometimes," Amy said quietly, "talking is the first step to understanding." Professor Kethmoran raised his hand for silence. He looked at Amy with curious eyes. "And you believe this will succeed where our advanced methods have failed?" Amy was honest. "I do not know if it will succeed, but I know that what you have tried has not worked. Perhaps it is time to try something completely different." The debate continued for hours. Some professors thought the idea was ridiculous. Others were curious to see what would happen. A few secretly hoped that the human would fail quickly so they could stop wasting time on impossible students. Finally, Professor Kethmoran made a decision. "Dr. Chen, you may try your approach, but you will have complete responsibility for Zarath during this time. If she causes any major problems, the experiment ends immediately." Amy nodded. "I understand. Thank you for this opportunity." After the meeting, Professor Kethmoran walked with Amy toward her new office. "I must ask," he said, "why do you want to work with our most difficult student? You could have chosen any other assignment." Amy paused and looked out a window at the Academy gardens. "On my planet, we have a saying. Every flower grows differently, but they all need sunlight. Perhaps Zarath just needs a different kind of light." Professor Kethmoran did not understand what she meant, but something in her calm confidence made him hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this small human teacher would find a way to reach the unreachable student. The next morning, Amy sent a simple message to Zarath. "Would you like to have lunch together today? I am new here and would enjoy the company." Zarath stared at the message for a long time. No teacher had ever invited her to lunch before. No one had ever said they wanted her company. She was suspicious, but also curious. She wrote back, "Why?" Amy's reply came quickly. "Because I think you might have interesting things to say." For the first time in months, Zarath smiled. Amy chose to meet Zarath in the Academy's workshop instead of the cafeteria. The workshop was a large room filled with tools, machines, and half-finished projects. Most students were not allowed to use it without supervision, but Amy had gotten special permission. When Zarath arrived, she found Amy sitting at a workbench, taking apart a broken communication device. The human looked up and smiled when she saw the young alien. "Thank you for coming," Amy said. "I hope you do not mind meeting here instead of the cafeteria. I thought you might find this more interesting." Zarath's 4 eyes widened as she looked around the workshop. She had been banned from this room after her first month at the Academy, when she had improved several important machines without permission. "I am not supposed to be here," Zarath said, but she stepped inside anyway. "I know," Amy replied, "but I think rules should sometimes be questioned. Do you agree?" This was not what Zarath expected. Teachers always told her that rules must be followed. They never asked if she agreed with them. "Yes," she said carefully, still suspicious of some trick. Amy continued working on the device while they talked. I have been watching you in classes. You seem bored. The lessons are too slow, Zarath said, moving closer to see what Amy was doing. They teach things I already know, or they teach them in stupid ways. What would make them better? Amy asked, not looking up from her work. Zarath was surprised by the question. No one had ever asked her opinion about how to improve classes. More hands-on work, less sitting and listening, projects that actually matter. Amy nodded and held up a small circuit board. This communication device is broken. The Academy's repair service says it cannot be fixed. What do you think? Zarath looked at the device with her sharp eyes. Her 4 arms moved as she examined it from different angles. The main processor is damaged, but the rest is fine. You could replace it with 2 smaller processors working together. It would actually work better than before. Show me, Amy said, pushing the tools toward her. For the next hour, Zarath worked on the device while Amy watched and asked questions. The young alien's hands moved with incredible skill, her 4 arms working independently on different parts of the machine. As she worked, she explained her thinking process. Most people think in straight lines, Zarath said, connecting 2 circuits. They want everything neat and orderly, but real solutions are messy. They twist and turn and find new paths. Amy listened carefully. Is that how your people think? Yes, we call it chaos thinking. We see patterns where others see confusion. We find solutions by breaking rules instead of following them. As Zarath worked, Amy noticed something important. The young alien was not destructive or wild when she had a real problem to solve. She was careful, creative, and brilliant. Her need to break rules came from frustration with systems that did not match how her mind worked. There, Zarath said, activating the device. It hummed to life, working perfectly. It is better than it was before. Amy tested the device and found that Zarath was right. This is excellent work. Thank you. You are not going to punish me for touching the equipment? Zarath asked. Why would I punish you for solving a problem? Amy replied. They continued to meet in the workshop every day. Amy always brought broken devices or unsolved technical problems. Zarath approached each challenge with enthusiasm, her 4 hands dancing over tools and components. But Amy did more than just give her things to fix. She listened to Zarath's stories about her home planet, where her people built floating cities that changed shape with the wind. She asked about Vorthak culture and why they valued chaos over order. On my world, Zarath explained one day, we believe that rigid things break under pressure. Flexible things bend and survive. Your academy teaches rigidity. It makes students weak. But structure can be helpful too, Amy said gently. It helps people work together and share knowledge. Maybe, Zarath admitted. But not your kind of structure. It is too tight, like a cage. Amy thought about this. What if we could find a different kind of structure? One that bends instead of breaking? This idea intrigued Zarath. Together, they began designing new ways to organize learning that would work better for different types of minds. Zarath suggested creating project-based classes where students could choose their own paths to reach learning goals. Amy contributed ideas about how different species might need different teaching methods. Word of their collaboration began to spread through the academy. Other teachers noticed that Zarath was attending classes regularly and had stopped causing major disruptions. Some were curious about what Amy was doing differently. Professor Kethmoran visited the workshop one afternoon and found Amy and Zarath working together on a complex energy converter. They were so focused on their work that they did not notice him at first. This modification should increase efficiency by 30%, Zarath was saying, her 4 hands adjusting different components simultaneously. But will it be stable? Amy asked. Sometimes improvements come with unexpected problems. Good point, Zarath said, pausing to think. We should test it in small steps. Professor Kethmoran watched in amazement. This was not the same rebellious student who had tormented his classes for 3 years. This Zarath was engaged, thoughtful, and cooperative. When they finally noticed him, Zarath tensed up, expecting criticism or punishment. But Professor Kethmoran simply asked about their project. We are improving the energy efficiency of academy systems, Amy explained. Zarath has found ways to optimize several devices. These improvements could save the Academy significant resources, Zarath added quietly. Professor Kethmorin examined their work. The modifications were brilliant, showing deep understanding of both engineering principles and practical application. "This is impressive work," he said. After he left, Zarath turned to Amy with confusion. He did not yell at me. He did not say I was breaking rules. "Maybe he is starting to see what I see," Amy said with a smile. "What do you see?" Zarath asked. "I see a brilliant young scientist who is trapped in the wrong kind of classroom. I see someone who thinks differently, not wrongly. I see potential that just needed the right environment to grow." For the first time since arriving at the Academy, Zarath felt truly understood. She had found someone who did not try to change her into something else, but instead helped her become the best version of herself. As their afternoon session ended, Zarath made a decision. "Amy," she said, "I would like to try attending regular classes again, but can you help me find ways to make them more interesting?" Amy smiled. "I would be happy to help, but remember, the goal is not to change the classes to fit you perfectly. Sometimes we need to find ways to work within systems while still being true to ourselves." Zarath nodded, understanding the wisdom in this balance. For the first time in her life, she was learning not just facts and formulas, but how to navigate a world that was different from her own while keeping her unique strengths intact. The transformation had begun, but it was not the kind anyone had expected. Amy had not tamed the wild alien girl. Instead, she had helped her find her own path to growth. News of Zarath's change spread quickly through the Academy. Students whispered in the hallways about how the impossible girl was now attending classes without causing trouble. Teachers gathered in small groups, trying to understand what the human had done that they could not. Professor Veltar was the first to notice the real difference. During his advanced mathematics class, Zarath raised one of her 4 hands to ask a question. "Professor," she said politely, "this equation assumes linear thinking, but what if we approached it using spiral mathematics instead?" The class fell silent. For 3 years, Zarath had either ignored lessons completely or disrupted them with pranks. Now she was contributing ideas that made Professor Veltar pause and think. "Explain your reasoning," he said, genuinely curious. Zarath stood and moved to the board. Her 4 hands worked together, drawing complex patterns that showed how mathematical problems could be solved using curved thinking instead of straight lines. The other students watched in amazement as she demonstrated solutions that were both elegant and efficient. "This is quite innovative," Professor Veltar admitted. "Where did you learn this approach?" "I did not learn it," Zarath said. "I developed it. My species naturally thinks in spirals and curves, but I never thought it could be useful in your classes until now." After class, several students approached Zarath for the first time. They wanted to understand her unique problem-solving methods. She found herself explaining Vorthak thinking patterns to curious minds from different species. "Your brain works so differently from ours," said Kira, a student from the water world of Aquanos. "It is like you see solutions from angles we cannot imagine." "Everyone's brain works differently," Zarath replied. "That is what makes learning interesting." Word of these successes reached the Academy Council. They called a meeting with Amy to understand what methods she was using. "Dr. Chen," said Council Leader Torvash, an ancient being whose species had founded the Academy centuries ago, "your results with student Zarath are unprecedented. Please explain your techniques." Amy sat before the council of impressive alien leaders, feeling small but confident. "I did not use any special techniques. I simply tried to understand her instead of changing her." "Understand her how?" asked Council Member Pextari. "I learned about her species, her culture, and her natural way of thinking. Then I found ways for her to use those strengths instead of fighting against them." The council members exchanged glances. This was not the kind of advanced behavioral modification they expected. "But what about discipline?" asked Council Member Zekthor. "How do you maintain order without strict rules?" "I found that Zarath responds better to purpose than to punishment," Amy explained. When she understands why something matters, she chooses to participate. When she is forced to comply, she rebels. Council leader Torvash leaned forward. Are you suggesting that our traditional methods are wrong? Amy chose her words carefully. I am suggesting that different students may need different approaches. What works for one species might not work for another. The council was quiet for a long moment. Finally, council leader Torvash spoke. These are challenging ideas, Dr. Chen, but your results speak for themselves. We would like you to document your methods for other teachers to study. As Amy left the council chambers, she felt both excited and nervous. She knew that changing how the academy operated would not be easy. Many teachers had spent their careers perfecting traditional methods and would resist new approaches, but the changes had already begun. Other professors started asking Amy for advice about their difficult students. She helped them understand that behavioral problems often came from mismatched teaching styles rather than character flaws. Professor Kethmoran was among the first to request help. I have another student who reminds me of Zarath, he said, a young Crystallian who seems unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes. Amy observed the student, named Hexandra, whose species had minds that worked very quickly and needed constant stimulation. Traditional lectures moved too slowly for her rapid thinking. Try giving her multiple small tasks instead of one long assignment, Amy suggested. Let her switch between activities when she feels ready. Professor Kethmoran was skeptical but agreed to try. To his surprise, Hexandra flourished under this new approach. Her grades improved dramatically when she was allowed to work at her natural pace. Meanwhile, Zarath was developing her own reputation as an innovative thinker. Her engineering projects were solving real problems around the academy. She created a new water recycling system that was more efficient than the old one. She designed communication devices that worked better for species with different hearing ranges. But the most important change was in Zarath herself. She began making friends with other students who appreciated her unique perspective. She started a study group where students from different species shared their natural problem-solving methods. It is amazing how much we can learn from each other, Zarath told Amy during one of their workshop sessions. I never realized that thinking differently was a strength instead of a problem. Amy smiled as she watched Zarath work on her latest project, a device that could translate not just words but thinking patterns between different species. You are helping the Academy understand that diversity makes us all stronger. The transformation was not limited to students. Teachers began experimenting with new methods based on Amy's principles. They created flexible classroom structures that accommodated different learning styles. They developed assessment methods that measured understanding rather than compliance. Professor Veltar started incorporating art and movement into mathematics classes for species that learned through physical activity. Dr. Morgesh created logic puzzles that appealed to emotional as well as rational thinking. Even Professor Kethmoran began using collaborative projects instead of individual assignments for species that thrived in groups. The Academy slowly became a place where differences were celebrated rather than eliminated. Students who had struggled under the old system began to excel when taught in ways that matched their natural abilities. But perhaps the most significant change was in how problems were viewed. Instead of seeing difficult students as failures, teachers began to see them as opportunities to discover new approaches to education. Zarath often reflected on how much her life had changed. A year ago, everyone thought I was broken, she told Amy. Now they see that I was just different. You helped me see that difference can be beautiful. Amy felt proud of what they had accomplished together, but she knew the real credit belonged to Zarath. You were never broken, she said. You just needed someone to believe in your potential. As the academic year progressed, other schools in the galaxy began asking about the Academy's new methods. Delegations of educators visited to observe classes and interview teachers about their innovative approaches. The impossible student had become proof that there were no impossible students, only impossible expectations. Zarath's success had opened the door to a new understanding of education itself. But their work was not finished. There were still students who struggled, still teachers who resisted change, and still systems that needed improvement. However, they now had hope and a proven path forward. The academy was transforming, one student and one teacher at a time. 2 years after Amy first arrived at the academy, graduation day brought changes no one had expected. Zarath stood before the assembled crowd of students, teachers, and galactic dignitaries, preparing to present her final project. Her 4 hands moved gracefully as she activated a device that looked like a small silver sphere. Suddenly, the air around her filled with gentle lights that pulsed in complex patterns. "This is the Universal Communication Bridge," Zarath announced. "It does not just translate words between species. It translates thinking patterns, emotions, and cultural concepts." The audience watched in amazement as the device demonstrated its capabilities. When a Zenthari student spoke about honor, the device showed how that concept felt different to a Vorthak mind, where honor meant creative freedom rather than rigid duty. When an Aquanos student described the beauty of flowing water, others could feel the emotional connection that water dwellers had to their element. "For too long, we have tried to force different species to think alike," Zarath continued. "But our differences are not problems to solve. They are strengths to celebrate. This device helps us understand each other without losing what makes us unique." The demonstration was met with thunderous applause from students and stunned silence from many faculty members. What Zarath had created went far beyond a simple translation device. She had built a bridge between different ways of experiencing reality. Council leader Torvash rose from his seat. "Student Zarath, this work represents a breakthrough in interspecies understanding. The Academy Council would like to offer you a position as a junior researcher." Zarath looked out at the crowd, her yellow eyes finding Amy in the audience. 2 years ago, she had been the Academy's biggest problem. Now she was being offered a position usually reserved for graduate students with years of additional study. "I accept," she said with a confident smile. "But I have one condition. I want to work with students who are struggling, like I once did. I want to help them find their own paths to success." Amy felt tears in her eyes as she watched her former student make this choice. Zarath could have chosen any research position, but she wanted to help others who felt lost and misunderstood. After the ceremony, Amy and Zarath walked together through the academy gardens. The singing flowers that Zarath had planted years ago were still there, their melodious voices now considered an important part of the campus atmosphere. "I have been thinking about what you taught me," Zarath said as they sat beside a fountain. "You showed me that the problem was not with me. It was with how others saw me." "You did the hard work of changing," Amy replied. "I just helped you see your own potential." "But that is the important part," Zarath insisted. "Before you came, everyone wanted to fix me. You were the first person who thought I was already complete, just misunderstood." Their conversation was interrupted by Professor Kethmoran, who approached with a young alien student Amy had never seen before. The student had 6 legs and moved with quick, nervous energy that reminded Amy of Zarath's early days at the academy. "Dr. Chen, Zarath," Professor Kethmoran said, "I would like you to meet Rixtar. He arrived yesterday from the Hive Worlds. He is having some adjustment difficulties." Amy and Zarath exchanged a knowing look. They both recognized the signs. A brilliant student whose natural behaviors did not fit the Academy's traditional structure. "What kind of difficulties?" Amy asked gently. Rixtar spoke in rapid, clicking sounds that the universal translator converted to words. "They want me to work alone, but my species thinks as a group. They want me to compete, but we believe in sharing knowledge. They say I cheat because I try to help other students with their work." Zarath knelt down to Rixtar's level, her 4 hands moving in a gesture of understanding that she had learned from Amy. "You are not cheating. You are just thinking like your people naturally think. That is not wrong." "But the teachers say I must follow their rules," Rixtar replied, his 6 legs shifting nervously. "Some rules are important," Zarath said. "But some rules can be changed when we understand why they exist and find better ways to achieve the same goals." Amy watched proudly as Zarath began working with the new student, using the same patient understanding that had helped her own transformation. The cycle was beginning again, but this time with hope instead of frustration. Over the following months, Amy and Zarath developed a new program at the Academy. They called it the Individual Learning Initiative, and it provided alternative pathways for students whose natural abilities did not match traditional teaching methods. Students like Rixtar learned to work in collaborative groups that honored their hive mind heritage while still meeting academic requirements. Visual learners were given hands-on projects instead of written exams. Students with rapid processing minds were allowed to work at accelerated paces. The program's success attracted attention from across the galaxy. Educational delegations visited from dozens of worlds, eager to learn about these innovative methods. But the real measure of success was simpler. There were no longer any impossible students at the Academy. Every student who struggled was seen as an individual with unique needs, rather than a problem to be solved. Amy often reflected on how much the Academy had changed. Teachers who had once focused on enforcing compliance now spent their time discovering each student's natural strengths. The rigid hierarchy that had defined the school for centuries had evolved into a more flexible community of learners. Professor Kethmoran had become one of the program's strongest supporters. "I spent years trying to make students fit our system," he told Amy during a faculty meeting. "I never thought to make our system fit the students." "It is not about making the system fit everyone perfectly," Amy replied. "It is about being flexible enough to help each person find their own way to learn and grow." The Academy's reputation spread throughout the galaxy as a place where diversity was not just tolerated, but valued. Species that had never considered sending their children to galactic schools began enrolling students. Zarath had become the Academy's most effective counselor for struggling students. Her own experience of feeling different and misunderstood gave her unique insight into their challenges. "The secret," she would tell new teachers, "is not to see problems. See potential waiting for the right opportunity to grow." On quiet evenings, Amy and Zarath would still meet in the workshop now to develop new learning tools rather than fix broken devices. Their friendship had grown beyond teacher and student into true colleagues working toward the same goal. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come to the Academy?" Zarath asked one evening as they worked on plans for a new adaptive classroom. Amy considered the question seriously. "I think you would have found your way eventually. You are too smart and too determined to stay trapped forever." "Maybe," Zarath said, "but it would have taken much longer, and it would have been much lonelier." As Amy prepared to return to her quarters that night, she looked back at the Academy with satisfaction. The impossible student had become an exceptional teacher. The broken system had learned to bend instead of break. And the small human teacher had discovered that sometimes the most powerful tool for change was simply believing in someone's potential. The Academy's motto had once been, "Order through unity." Now it read, "Strength through diversity." It was a small change in words that represented a revolutionary change in thinking. Zarath's story had become legend among the students, proof that being different was not a limitation, but a gift. Her success had opened doors for countless others who had felt lost in systems that did not understand them. But perhaps the most important lesson was simpler. Every individual has value, every perspective has merit, and every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Amy had not tamed the impossible student. She had helped her discover that she was never impossible at all. The Academy continued to evolve, one student and one teacher at a time, building a future where differences were celebrated and every mind could find its own pie.